Welcome to this first episode of Sky Eye Imagery's useful drone tips. After flying drones for quite some time and capturing content both in the air and on the ground, I wanted to share some useful tips and tricks and things that I have learned from other content capture specialists that hopefully will help you. I want to start off first by looking at drone filming with the sun behind you and then the sun basically facing the sensor and how ND filters can help. In order to help you understand what it is I am doing, I've reverted back to the remote control screen so you can see what functions I am operating. Here, the sun is directly behind the drone and therefore it's facing onto these red brick buildings. The EV is set to 0. That EV is basically the exposure level. It's the level of light you are allowing to hit the sensor on the drone. Now, when people talk about sensor, they talk about the camera. Without any sort of EV adaptation or ND filter, you will notice that the colours can be a little bit bleached in bright sunlight. So when I click on EV and adjust the exposure, say to 0.3 or 0.7, what you'll find is that bleaching starts to reduce and you start to get a bit more definition in the colour. And you can see here from the red bricks and the black tiling that the colour seems to come out just a little bit more as you reduce the exposure level. You will see here that when I reset the exposure level to 0, you get a little bit more of that reflection back and a little bit more bleaching of the colours. After zooming out, you can now see again the bleaching effect when the EV is set to 0. So as I've mentioned, we were shooting with the sun behind you. Now what I'm doing is I'm rotating the drone 180 degrees to shoot with the sun facing the drone. And what we'll look at here is how the sun affects the camera sensor and what you can do to mitigate the effects of bright sunlight on the camera sensor. And this is where timing your drone capture footage is really important. Do you film in the morning, midday when the sun is overhead, or do you film later in the day? You have to research your project, the tasking that you are asked to do, to see when the best time to capture imagery is. And this is why planning your drone shoot for a personal task or a business task is so really important. You need to understand where the sun is and how that affects the item that you are photographing, whether it's a house or whether it's a sporting event or anything like that. So we zoom out here and again, we really get so much bleaching because we have the sun in our face and we don't have an ND filter. We've adjusted the EV level and it's just not going to cut it. So in the next bit, I'm going to show you what an ND filter can do and the difference it will make to your drone shooting. Just positioning the drone now, facing into the sun, looking at that tall building in the distance, and we'll do a side-by-side comparison so you can see the image without an ND filter and with an ND filter. Here's my drone and the case of ND filters. What you'll do when you need to replace the ND filters is basically take off the front lens of the drone and then replace that with an ND filter that will go over the camera sensor. There's a clear differentiation here between the left image and the right image. The left one has no filter and the right one does have a filter. Whichever one you use in terms of filters is up to you on the day. An ND filter is basically like wearing a pair of sunglasses. It reduces the amount of light that gets into your eyes, or in this case, into the camera sensor, and just helps to reduce the glare and sharpen things up ever so slightly. Hopefully, you can notice here, as we zoom into those buildings, that haze has sort of reduced or disappeared thanks to the ND filter. There's not so much glare. And when we rotate back around to view those red brick houses on the housing estate, hopefully you'll be able to see the difference that the ND filter makes. And as you see here, like the previous example, we have the no ND filter on the left and the ND filter image on the right. And this time we have the sun behind us. And again, you can see with the ND filter fitted, it's just a little bit clearer. We haven't done anything with the exposure level at this stage. I wanted to show you an interesting feature that I found out when fixing a POI onto an object or onto the ground. As you'll know, when you want to fix a POI, you click and drag on the screen. When you do that, what usually happens is you get two vertical lines that surround the area that you want a POI. This stage, you've made the selection, but the drone hasn't yet created a pinpoint on the ground. And I found sometimes that rotating the drone slightly to the left and to the right helps it to acquire that pinpoint. Once that pinpoint is established, you know then that the drone and the camera are fixed onto that point. If you try and navigate before that pinpoint appears, your camera will not be fixed onto that point. You can also zoom in onto an object, select it, and have the drone create a pinpoint when you're zoomed in. But what you will find is if you're zoomed in and you create the selection, you then zoom out before that drone has acquired that pinpoint, it will quite often lose that selection and return an error message to you. This is another example of where we're zoomed in, we create that selection area, and then we zoom out, and then the drone loses connection with that selection area, and you get an error message, and the box goes a bit haywire. In this case, you have not got that pinpoint, so don't start flying thinking that you do have that pinpoint. However, what you do find is when you zoom in, make that selection area, wait, do a little bit of a pivot, you'll find that the pinpoint then locates onto the ground, and then you are good to fly from there. I wanted to finish off by just giving you some tips that I've learned about perspective. The wonderful thing about drone work is that you can point the gimbal in a multitude of different angles and work the drone so that you can get great perspectives on the same object. So here we're just doing a left to right nice overhead fly. And you'll see these shots in a lot of B-roll for television and internet. I'm going to switch back now to the controller view where I'm going to drop a pin And this is something that I really like doing. And it's where we pull back and we do a nice reveal. Again, we're looking at the same area, but from a different perspective. So here I've highlighted the area I want to pin. I'm moving the drone just slightly to acquire that pin. And then when it's acquired, we'll pull back and you'll see that it's a great reveal shot. As we pull back, you will notice that we just get a whole different perspective on the area that we're looking at. You get to see the foreground, the background, and the detail of the houses in between. And this is really good for your ending clip or possibly a beginning clip where you start out and then go in. I hope you've enjoyed this short video. I'll look to put together some more useful tips in the coming weeks. Thank you very much for watching.